I've been given the impossible task this evening. I the unintroducible. So, instead of saying things about accomplishments, which you all know, or what he does, which you all know, or where he's from, which you all know, or anything else, which you all know, I'm not going to tell you anything new here, so I'm going to play with some alliteration. We have the man from Morris, Minnesota, the bearer of the beard, the founder of Pharyngula, P.Z. Myers.
Yeah, don't talk too hard because we just discovered that my talk does not compute on this machine, and therefore my slides will not be viewable. Oh.
We just need you. It's okay.
Yeah, the slides are so good, and all my jokes are on the slides, so now you're not going to get the funny stuff. I think it's actually a plot by JT. He's been scheming all this time. So not only does he put me at the very end of a long line of awesome speakers, whereas now all of your expectations are greatly elevated. Thanks. I'm a giver. But I bet you he sabotaged my flash drive. I wouldn't put it past him. He's that kind of evil guy. He's almost as evil as I am. So anyway, let's see if I can do this. As I mentioned to August, I might have to do some bits and pieces of this where I wave my hands a lot and try to explain things. And you're going to have to use your mind's eye and imagine absolutely gorgeous slides. Which means maybe they'll be better. Right? Okay, well, what I wanted to do was I was going to introduce a few things up there. One is that I was going to show you, that nice photo of me that's in the book you got? You notice this? I know you don't notice the difference, but that's actually me 20 years ago. I haven't changed a bit. And the way JT was able to get his hands on this is that we did this little fundraiser for Camp Quest. And I cunningly tricked these people into offering great forfeits if they would win, and then I told all my readers to go give them money in their name. And my forfeit was the picture there is I was going to recreate my look from 1980, and so you see I've shaved off a little tiny patch on my chin. JT is supposed to shave his entire head. What is happening?
I will play this tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
The other thing up there, again on my slide that you're imagining up there, I was going to mention the fact that my blog is changing locations. And it's going to be moving to freethoughtblogs.com/Pharyngula. You'll be able to find it. I will have redirects all over the place on the existing site. That will happen on Monday. And we're also going to have a number of other great bloggers. Ed Brayton is doing a lot of the work on setting this up, so he's going to be there with a lot of people. And we're also going to have Rita Christina and Jennifer Frank join us. freethoughtblogs.com is going to be the one site on the internet you will visit every day, right? And JT really wants to get on there. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, so what do I want to talk about today? Well, I want to talk about prophets and prophecies, because they're kind of cool. That there are all these great prophecies that are being made all the time. You heard the one earlier this year, Harold Camping said the world is going to end. You may have heard that the world is supposed to end in 2012. You know, there's something with the Aztec calendar running out. Mayan. Oh, is it the Mayan calendar? Okay. And the Mayans are all dead now, so you can't run out and buy a new one. Which their mind means we're going to end them. It's going to be a total disaster when Hallmark goes out of business someday. So anyway, there's all these prophecies going around. And I used to be a fan of those weird little tabloids. Do you all remember the Weekly World News? Every year, at the end of the year, they would have this big roundup of the prophecies for the coming new year. And they would get people like Gene Dixon, the total fraud and quack, to rattle off a whole bunch of things that were going to happen in the next year. And again, the slide would have been gorgeous because it was all this stuff from Weekly World News. You'll just have to imagine now. But okay, they would announce grand stuff like, you know, volcanoes erupt in downtown Manhattan. Like geology doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. Or one I really liked was Bush marries Osama bin Laden and adopts a shaved ape baby. Which was really cute. There was the great one where giant squid attacks the Jersey Shore. I don't know whether you're just fans of the show, or you hate Snooki, or you're from New Jersey. But yeah, there was that great one. And then, of course, there were all these trivial things, you know, like there was a Britney Spears gets sex change operation, marries Angelina Jolie. Weird stuff, but people ate this up. You know, the thing is, though, that they never did stop and reevaluate things. They never did, you know, after January, they never went back and said, okay, last year Gene Dixon predicted, and then tallied up all of her misses, because that would just be too embarrassing. So that never happened. See, what these were is I've got a categorization system for these. These are the prophets of the surreal. These are people who just make stuff up because it's weird and it's interesting. The desire is simply to get novelty out there and shake up the status quo or indulge in a little wish fulfillment. And sometimes they're just plain crazy, as you all know. Now, you can probably think of other examples more hallowed than tabloid journalism. The first one that always comes to my mind is this guy, John of Patmos. You've heard of him? He wrote this book called Revelation. It's in your Bible. I know you guys may not be familiar with this, but at the very end, you know, go back to your hotel, the dorms don't have these, but the hotel, go to the end of the book, and there's a chapter called Revelation. It's a real hoot to read. You see, the guy was tripping high as a kite when he wrote that, I think. And it was a really bad trip, because this is a nasty, nasty little story. He's just howling insanely about his fantasies of vindication, the moment when all of his delusions were proven true. And all of his critics faced the Lord's vengeance. It's really, you know, it's right-wing vengeance, wish fulfillment fantasy. It's violent, it's crude, it's horrible. Anyway, what I'll show you here is I put up for you a lovely picture from Dürer of the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. You've heard of this, right? I know this crowd again. You all think, okay, Richard Dawkins, Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. But no, the original 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse were these crazy guys who were called forth by a lamb blowing a horn. Trust me, I told you, he's tripping when he's blowing a horn. And these 4 horsemen come out with swords and various things and horses of various colors. And, you know, there's like death and there's like pestilence, and there's war and famine. And they're all charging around saying weird things. And it's really unfortunate I don't have it here because you could read it and you could see, yeah, this guy's nuts. It's really crazy stuff. So anyway, the point is it's this weird, weird stuff about death riding up and killing everybody. I told you, this is his revenge fantasy. And it's vivid imagery. It's very vivid imagery. It's lovely writing if you go in for that sort of thing. Because, yeah, it's worked its way into the popular culture. But you gotta ask yourself, what does it mean? And I'll tell you right now, it means nothing at all. Except that John of Patmos was freaking out. These are prophecies that aren't testable aren't actually expected to occur in any situation which will be able to make a calm assessment of accuracy, and they're often full of these kinds of gibberings that don't mean much at all, but are supposed to generate an emotional response. And in this case, the heebie-jeebies, or fear and worry. Now, that's one kind of prophet, just the crazy wild man. And this is often what we think of when we think of biblical prophets, and hair everywhere, half naked with rags on, and screaming end of the world and all this kind of stuff. There's another kind of prophet too, and these are the prophets of the scam. And I think these are the most common nowadays. I'm going to give you an example of this. Here's a prophet of the scam at work. I'm sensing a communication from the afterlife. It's a name beginning with a J, or maybe an M. Is anyone here? Yes, you. Must be, and what's your name?
Michael Lynn.
Michael Lynn. Okay, very good. It's an M. I was right. Score one, right? And I'm also kidding. Is there somebody you know at some time in the past who's dead? Yeah? Yes. I'm psychic. I knew this. Now, I'm getting another impression here. It was a man or a woman. It was a man, see? Now, this man is sending me a message for you. And he's coming through clearly now. I'm finally getting it. He wants you to know that heaven is lovely. Does that make you feel better? Yes, very good. He also says that you seem to have lost something. And he thinks when you get home you should check under the sofa cushions. Promise me you'll do that. There's something under the sofa cushions. And this dead guy says, look there. Are you impressed yet? I mean, that's great. Dead on the money. I was exactly right. So now you must trust my authority because I have magic powers. You see, that's what these guys are all about. Prophets of the scam are all about convincing you that they are a trustworthy authority with valuable knowledge, when of course they have absolutely nothing of the kind. Now, in my years of engaging, that's a nice word for it, let's say combating religious absurdity, the number one piece of evidence that I get when I question the authority of the Bible is of that kind. It's preaching the authority of the Bible, and the way they do this is they tell me all about the book of Daniel. Again, I know, atheists, you don't know what I'm talking about. You've never heard of this guy, right? Daniel, lion's dead. Anyway, he was this prophet who's thought to have lived in about the 6th century before Christ. So we're going way, way, way back. And the book is supposed to be full of prophecies. And they all came true. Therefore, God. Seriously, I get that argument so many times. The book of Daniel. In particular, what the author always citing me is something that I bet you Dan Barker knows all about. This is the 70 weeks prophecy. Have you heard? Yeah. Okay. There's a little section there where it's supposedly describing events that will happen in the future, now our past, but Daniel's supposed future, in which Jerusalem would fall, okay, and then it would be rebuilt after a period, which was supposed to be something like 70 weeks. But when you read this stuff, it's all over the map. There's all kinds of interpretations of this nowadays. It's kind of sneaky, actually, because while they claim it all came true, and if you try then to pin down on exactly what came true, depending on who you talk to, you get completely different answers. It's amazing. It just depends on which sect they come from. So, for instance, Jerusalem was supposed to have fallen, and the book of Daniel conveniently fails to mention the name of the bad guy who did it. Just somebody will make it fall. It's just like McLean's male dead person, I don't know who it is, and she didn't tell me his name, so anyway, I kind of fumbled over it, right? That's what's going on in the book of Daniel. So they claim it all come true, but when you talk to different people, some people say, The person was Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BC, and it was his actions in Jerusalem. Some will say it's this guy Artaxerxes in the 5th century BC, and some will say Antiochus Epiphanes in the 2nd century. And some will tear apart the punctuation in complicated and interesting ways, and they'll say, well, it was 70 weeks, but it was 70 weeks broken up in all these different periods scattered over centuries. And somehow part of it is a prediction of the coming of Jesus, which came true, right? Therefore, again, God. So there's no consistency in the prediction. It's just gobbledygook that they throw out, and it can be interpreted after the fact in all kinds of interesting ways. Now, furthermore, the interesting thing too is the consensus of scholars is that the story of the 6th century BC prophet was actually written in the 2nd century BC, long after all of the events transpired. So this is kind of like me sitting down and trying to convince you that Abraham Lincoln was a great prophet because I wrote this story about Honest Abe predicting a giant squid coming ashore and destroying the Jersey Shore. Maybe it didn't happen, but hey, if it happened, well, obviously, Abraham Lincoln is God, or something. Now, there's another more personal example I experienced just this spring. I was in Dublin, and some people have actually mentioned this to me here. I was met by a team of Muslims who tried to convince me that the Quran was a source of scientific information. Because, they said, the Quran talks about mountains having roots. Okay, that's one piece of evidence. And now modern geologists will look and they'll tell you, hey, mountains have deep structures. They're built deep into the mantle. There are big depressions in there. There's huge piles of rocks deep under the earth. Therefore, the Quran, Muhammad never went digging down in mountains. He couldn't possibly have known this. Therefore, you must have gotten it from Allah, who told him all about it. The second major piece of evidence they told me about, I was much more familiar with because I've read this before. The Quran, they said, describes human embryonic development in scientifically valid detail. They said, first the embryo looks like a leech, and then it looks like chewed gum. Exactly as science now says it does. I'm a developmental biologist. This was hilarious to me. It's not true. Again, my beautiful slide up here, I've actually got some stuff I pulled off the web when you talk about this stuff. And it's gorgeous. They got this illustration of a human embryo. So imagine up there at the top, human embryo all kind of curled around. And then underneath it, what they've got is somebody put a big wad of gum in their mouth, chewed it up, and then bit into it, and stuck it there. And it's, it's neatly labeled. The top one is labeled, from Moore and Prasad, their embryology text, which I used in my courses. And it says this is an embryo at such and such a stage. And then the second part, B, it's labeled a piece of chewed gum. Science, right? So anyway, they told me all this stuff, and they told me it was all true in detail. And they said it's exactly as science now describes it. No, it isn't. And they also said, this was really bizarre and amusing to me. They said Muhammad was an illiterate ignoramus living in a land full of stupid hicks who couldn't possibly have known about contemporary science, Greek science. Therefore, Allah had to have instructed him. It's this amazing approach where they denigrate their prophet to an extreme degree in order to make their case. Unfortunately, their ideas are all wrong. The idea that tall structures must have deeper foundations is kind of intuitive and obvious, I hope, to most of us. So you can see where Muhammad might have assumed this. And the passages in the Quran are really poetically vague. They're very brief. They offer no geological detail at all. And the stuff about embryos is simply laughable. Really, it's crude, boring, uninteresting. These are descriptions that have no observational evidence presented. They're borrowed wholly from earlier Greek writings. Yes, there were traders and scholars in the Muslim world way back at the time of Muhammad. And they also get things wrong, and they miss obvious embryological features that should have had more prominence. When embryologists get together and gush and grew and awe over embryos, we're pointing to think, oh, look at those gorgeous big extra embryonic membranes, aren't they lovely? Oh, I'm turned on just looking at them. And this obvious stuff is just completely left out of these descriptions. Now, the poverty and the errors of poor science are actually evidence against their God. Why wouldn't an omniscient deity who favored a particular tribe of humans give their priests special privileged, useful, and powerful knowledge to give them an edge? They're the chosen people. Imagine if God had given his chosen people recipes for antibiotics. Ooh, gunpowder, yeah. Steel smelting. Gynecology would have been kind of useful. If they had done this 4,000 years ago, that tribe would have come rip-roaring out of wherever they were and taken over the entire world. No problem. They would have had such an advantage. And speaking as a developmental biologist, I think it would be really cool if the Quran or the Book of Genesis had some stuff on pox gene regulation. Look, it's missing. It's really a shame. So there's a lot of information that they just didn't bother ever. This God never gave them. Now, remember though, those two categories I gave you, the prophets of the surreal, the crazy ones who are ranting and wild, they just want to get you impressed emotionally with their ideas, and then the prophets of the scam over here on the other side. They're the ones who try to overwhelm you with these florid tales. They're either comical or terrifying, but which they are in fact trying to do this contrived correspondence between a purported prediction, which may not have been a prediction at all, and scientific reality, so that you think, oh, they've got inside information. They must be really special people who know something. So, again, one thing they both have in common is they don't give you the information that you can actually use. They're not trying to teach you to use information. They're not trying to get you to think critically. What they want you to do is they want you to go out and buy their tabloid or worship their God. That's what they're trying to do. They are not trying to teach you. They're not trying to help you deal with the future. And the thing is, these predictions, even if they did come true, they're leaving you kind of high and dry. There's not much you can do after that. For instance, Harold Camper, he's predicted now that the end of the world is coming in October. Jesus is going to appear in the Holy Land, and then there's going to be this amazing event where he's going to wipe out all of his enemies. There's going to be years of tribulation and suffering. We're all going to be in agony and suffering, except for his chosen elite who are going to get to go to heaven. And then there's going to be this grand judgment, and then he's going to split us apart, and some of us are going to heaven, and others are going to hell. And I bet you this room is mostly going to hell. Thinking as a scientist, if I actually had information about the specific day and date and the event that was going to occur, what I would do is I would dispatch a sniper squad to Palestine around about October, station them in the appropriate place, and then when Jesus appears, take him out with a headshot. Terrorist Jesus would save a lot of trouble in times to come. And I actually wonder if maybe we aren't giving the Romans enough credit. They knew about this. They saw Jesus coming and said, oh, take him out. Remember, Jesus predicted the end of the world was going to come in the lifetime of his followers. And maybe the Romans are the real heroes here. And they took out the crazy Son of God man before he could start things rolling. Just saying. But you see, in the minds of these crazy people who make these prophecies, that's not how prophecies work. It's going to happen whether you want to stop it or not. There's nothing you can do. But here's how prophecy actually works. Real-world, functional, operational prophecy. There are real prophets walking the world now and in the past. They're called scientists. That's what prophets do, is they change things. What real prophets don't do is try to magically pull random facts out of the future. It turns out that the way to see the future is to look at the now and understand what's going on now and use our understanding of natural processes now to infer what will happen next. Tell that to John Patmos, the prophet Daniel, or the Weekly World News. Because this is how real prophecy is going to function. Now, My next slide is a real prophet. I will show you a nice historical prophet here. Another crazy guy, a wild man who's doing all kinds of crazy stuff, Isaac Newton. He was an astrologer, alchemist, tyrant king of the royal mint. The guy who on his deathbed declared that his greatest accomplishment of his life was maintaining his virginity. He was a lunatic, in other words. But he was also a genius. He came up with his 3 laws of motion to describe the behavior of objects and experiments, and extrapolated these to go further and predict the behavior of other phenomena. The flight of an artillery shell. Again, terrorist Jesus, artillery shell. This is, Newton really helped us out there. Anyway, so like the flight of an artillery shell, but also things like how do you fly to the moon. We owe to people like Isaac Newton, who figured out how the world works and made predictions. Now, he was an obsessive mathematician. His notebooks, we've got his notebooks, they're amazing. They're full of pages where he did things like calculate the logarithms of numbers to 50 decimal places just because he enjoyed doing it. Take that, Hemeth. You can real world problems. This is what we need to do, is we need to get crazy students who just want to sit down and do math because they love it. That sounds like but of course, also, I'll give props to him, and he's right on one thing, that you also want real problems, interesting problems to look at. And Newton had that himself. He wanted to know, how do you describe the motion of a planet in an elliptical orbit? His 3 laws, they describe the forces that operate and how it should happen, but how do you figure out how fast it's going at one point in its orbit? How do you know how long it spends in a particular place? How do you calculate all this stuff? So Isaac Newton, madman that he is, invents calculus to do that. That's impressive. That's pretty cool stuff. Now, that's a prophet. So he used mathematics and scientific observations to discover fundamental truths about the universe that we still use today that have opened the door to the whole world of physics. Change slides. I have to mention another prophet. And my slide up here would be a very intimidating set of equations, which I'm not going to read aloud to you because it's all Greek and Latin. I'm sorry. But anyway, I have a picture of a t-shirt that you can buy in the MIT bookstore. And what it is it says, and God said, string of equations, let there be light. Some of you may have seen this, you may be familiar with this t-shirt. It's a very popular t-shirt. It's wrong, because it wasn't God who said that. It was James Clerk Maxwell. Yeah! And what is on the shirt are Maxwell's laws. And what they are is a set of partial differential equations that describe the relationships between electromagnetism and light. And furthermore, these equations are the foundations of electronics, of optics, and modern communications technology. So who here has a cell phone? There must be a few of you. Bring them out. Come on. Call them all out. I want them up in the air. I want you to turn them on. Make it glow. And I want you to repeat after me. All hail James Clerk Maxwell. Very good, yes. These you owe to those equations. That set of predictions for the future. That's where James Maxwell laid out the path that we're taking now to give us awesome technology like this. Now, there's another prophet I was going to show next. Change the slide. Switch. And this is a guy you knew was coming. Who do you think I would next name as a great prophet?
Charlie.
How'd you know? Yeah. Charles Darwin. Darwin is, of course, he's best known for describing the past, our history, and how we got to be here. But I want to praise him for something a little bit more subtle, a little different. He forced us to rethink our place in the universe. No longer were we the end goal of history. No longer were we the entire purpose of existence. We had a place in a richer network of life. And it wasn't as king. After Darwin, the universe was no longer linear. It was complex and interconnected. And what I'd also have here, again, use your imaginations. Some of you who are biologists will have no problem with this. If I say the words trophic interactions, the brains light up. Yes. Ooh. Oh, I love science geeks. Yes. Food webs. You've all heard of these things, these complex networks of these different organisms in an environment that all have to work with each other, which often means eating each other, but that's okay. That's part of the great circle of life. They're all working together in complex ways. And food webs are complex, they're deep, they're interconnected, there's many layers to them, and they're feedback on each other. They're extremely beautiful and complicated, and very, very important for understanding our place in life. Everything ties together. And you see, if you damage one level, effects ripple outwards into all the others. Populations, ecology, genetics, environment, they are all interlocked. And that's one of the modern understandings that Darwin led us to. He was a true prophet of telling us how the living world operates. Yes, amen. But now you know what I have to do is I have to take the flip side of science. I just told you about James Clerk Maxwell, and yeah, we're all cheering, hooray! I love my cell phones. Yes, it's gorgeous. But there are also sorrowful stories to science. And this is the thing about true prophecy. It doesn't always tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes it tells you things that will make you very sad and make you want to cry. And again, imagine my slide. It's changed here. And it is a depressing slide that I will be showing you here, because what it is a chart of worldwide fish stocks over the last century. And you can imagine what the line looks like, right? It starts over there on the left near the top, and it goes in a nice straight line for a while, and then it starts to do this really interesting thing where it goes down and down and down and down. And this chart that I would have up here actually has two lines on it, and one line is a plot of the decrease in species taxa year by year. So every year species are being lost. And interestingly, that line is also going down. So it's going down a little rather slowly, but what it's telling you is that the rate of species loss is accelerating right now. It's not linear, it's going down. Well, it's dropping. Its acceleration is increasing. We're losing more and more species every year. The other line is the cumulative loss of species. And it goes, and in this particular chart that you'll have to imagine, it starts up at around 100%. And it drops down to close to 30% now. You can imagine where the line is going. You don't need to be a brilliant scientist. You could use calculus, since you know the rate of acceleration of loss, and you can estimate that function on the number of species. You could, if you were a good mathematician, Hammond, get to work on it, I'll send you the data. You could calculate how long it will be till it crashes. But you don't have to. Just look at the line and you see, zoom, it's plummeting. So we're losing fish. I know, you don't care. Yeah, where are we? We're in the middle of Ohio. Marine species going up. Do we have to worry about them? Yes, we do have to worry about them. And actually, I'm going to show you some data. Next slide. It's even worse than you think. Because when you look at the species loss, it's all going down. But what you're also seeing is that we're depleting trophic levels. Remember those food webs? This is a beautiful chart. Trust me, it's beautiful. And up there at the top, it's got things like sharks and tuna. Tuna we like to eat, we love to eat. And as you go down, it gets smaller fish, codfish, down to the little things that we eat, that we scoop up from the ocean, to krill. And what's happening is that we're not just uniformly knocking these species out. What we're overfishing primarily is the stuff near the top of the food web, tasty tuna. And what's being left behind is krill. Think about that for your lunch next time. Tuna sandwich or krill sandwich. That's what we're being left with. So all the species that are going away are primarily the ones we love best, or at least love to eat best. And they're depleting rapidly. So we're seeing this acceleration by which species we're knocking out. We're knocking out the top of the food chain. Then on top of this, there's more problems. As you may know, we've got these huge geological problems. The growing acidification of the oceans, the oxygenation, the poisoning of our richest fisheries with agricultural runoff. These are non-trivial issues. We're facing an oceanic apocalypse in the next century. The prophets have spoken. We're all looking at the imminent destruction of our oceans, and all of us biologists are walking around with these big signs saying the end is nigh. Doesn't that sound familiar? Only in this case, it's real. We've got the data. It's happening. Now remember, though, there's a difference between our prophets and the old-style religious prophets, the surrealists and the scam artists. Those guys preached a kind of fatalism. God's in charge, not you. And your fate is inescapable. It's going to happen. But we say something different. We've got the evidence. We've got the science. We say, look, it's happening. Here's the direction things are going. Here is what we must fix. It's time to change. And that's where you guys come in. Because I'm telling you, it's important that what we do is essential. That what we are the people who look at reality and say, this is something we have to repair. And we have to use real-world techniques to do that. We're not the crazy ones. They are. I'm going to disagree a little bit with some of what was said earlier, where we said we should let people be if they want to go to church. And I say no, it's too late. That what you need to do is not just get out there and do things to fix the problems of the world. And there are many problems in the world. I gave the example of world fisheries going away, but everything is going to hell right now. Global warming, emerging diseases. We can talk about political and economic issues, civil rights. What are we going to do with all these people that we've got? These are real-world problems that need real-world solutions. So who are you going to listen to? The old guys spewing bullshit out their asses while they thump their Bibles? Or are you going to buckle down and do real work? You're going to rely on answers that matter. Or are you going to make real changes? So we're facing all these troubles all around the world, and I'm here talking to you people, you secular, rational, reasonable, evidence-based, serious people, because you're our only hope. This is not just a social club. We aren't here just to work out rules and procedures for our meetings. This isn't happy fun time for young adults. Oh, it can't be. That's okay. Have fun when you can. What we're here for is to save the world. Thank you.